What's a Hot Drop by Aware Material 507. Kartak was not having a good day, nor were any of his fellow soldiers. As the latest round of enemy bombardment began screeching through the skies, Kartak quickly braced himself against the trench walls before the blast rocked him back. The Barentu Republic, Kartak's homeland, had been at war with the Ortal Hive for nearly a year, and Kartak found himself stuck in a trench, waiting to die. He was one of the millions of soldiers who had been smart and hardy enough to survive in this hellhole, but dumb enough to have signed up in the first place. Kartak shuddered as an artillery shell detonated close to his section of the trench. Kartak and his people were four-limbed amphibians, not too dissimilar to the turtles of Earth, according to humanity, their closest intergalactic neighbor, besides the Ortal. With their large, oval-shaped shells encompassing their torsos, Kartak begrudgingly agreed with the comparison. Not that my shell is going to keep me safe from an artillery round or a well-placed plasma shot, Kartak thought grimly. He was snapped out of his thoughts when he realized the bombardment had paused. This wasn't a good sign, as the Ortal only stopped their bombardments when they were about to launch a fresh wave of warriors. Kartak knew he had survived the last two. A fellow Barentu soldier to Kartak's right seemed confused as the veterans began grabbing their weapons and preparing to fire across no man's land. Must be one of the fresh replacements from the last transport, Kartak thought. Hope they last longer than the last batch. The next transport won't be coming for a month or two. Some veterans shoved the newer recruits into place, forcing them to ready their weapons. Not long after, the Ortal battle cry echoed across the trenches, and hundreds of thousands of enemy insectoid warriors rushed out of their muddy trenches. Kartak hefted his plasma rifle and aimed down the sight, waiting for the order to open fire. As the first Ortal Hive drones came into range, Kartak heard the order from his sergeant and began spraying plasma downrange. The first few ranks of enemy warriors fell immediately, only to be trampled by the next wave, and the next. Kartak fired frantically as the Ortal warriors closed the distance between them and the trench. In the chaos, he barely registered the radio operator shouting that reinforcements were on the way, which baffled him. No reinforcements would ever reach us in time, Kartak thought. It would take over an hour for any fresh troops to arrive from the landing site, and no sane transport pilot would dare fly close to an active battle. Thousands of soldiers were packed into each transport, so if even one went down, entire battalions would be lost. Transports always landed far behind the front lines, out of enemy range. Kartak dismissed the radio controller's words as empty encouragement from high command, a ploy to boost morale and keep them fighting a bit longer. Before he could refocus on the enemy, a loud, deafening whistle cut through the battlefield. Initially, Kartak and the other veterans thought it was friendly artillery, likely ordered to collapse the defense. Sighing, he resigned himself to the thought. At least we'll be taking a few of these damned bugs with us. Despite the looming danger, Kartak and the veterans kept firing, determined to take as many Ortal down as possible before the end. As the Ortal warriors charged, the Barentu soldiers continued their desperate defense. It seemed grim. More and more guns fell silent. Then, one of the fresh recruits near Kartak pointed to the sky and shouted, "Look! It's the reinforcements!" Kartak and several others glanced up, astonished. 3 angular atmospheric craft zoomed toward their position, dropping small, unfamiliar devices into the Ortal formation. Before anyone could react, the devices detonated, decimating swaths of the enemy and throwing their ranks into chaos. Kartak and the others took full advantage, pouring fire into the disoriented Ortal forces and retaking sections of the trench. As they fought, half a dozen more craft descended. Unlike the massive troop transports Kartak was used to, these were much smaller, moving with startling speed. They slowed only as they passed over the Ortal trenches, releasing racks of missiles and point defense turrets that spewed thousands of rounds into the fleeing enemy. This level of firepower was akin to a decently armed tank, but the sheer speed and suddenness of their arrival left Kartak stunned. One transport broke formation, flying directly over Kartak's section of the trench before landing. Two full squads of strange, thin bipedal soldiers in dark, reflective armor emerged, carrying sleek metal rifles. Kartak quickly recognized them as ballistic weapons. The squads spread out, taking up firing positions. Two more soldiers emerged, one in slightly more ornate armor, likely an officer, and another carrying a large communications rig. Kartak marveled at the size of the device, which looked twice the weight of a standard Barentu field kit, yet the operator carried it with ease. The officer surveyed the battlefield, now littered with Ortal corpses, before turning to Kartak's sergeant and speaking in a language Kartak didn't recognize. After a brief silence, a synthetic voice translated into their native tongue, requesting to be taken to the commanding officer. As Kartak's sergeant led the officer and the communications specialist to their commander, the rest of the human squads dropped into the trench. A rookie to Kartak's right muttered, "Humans, huh? They sure know how to make an entrance. Who the hell would drop transports in the middle of a battle?" One of the humans overheard, and through the translator, responded with a grin in his voice. "Who would drop straight into battle? The devil dogs, of course." "Ora!" His squad echoed the cry in unison. "If you think we're crazy, you should see the orbital drop shock troopers. Then you'll really know crazy. Ha! Rapid deployment into a combat zone? What a strange idea, Kartak thought. Before he could ponder it further, the Ortal reformed and prepared another charge. "Will those strike craft come back to deal with this wave?" Kartak asked. The human shook his head. "Nah. They're heading back to orbit to rearm. Besides, we can't let them steal all the fun, can we?" He said it more to his squad than to Kartak, before stepping up onto the trench and aiming his weapon at the advancing enemy. Kartak watched, baffled that they seemed eager to fight rather than call for another airstrike. As the Ortal battle cry echoed again, Kartak joined the humans in preparing for the next wave. While the Barentu charged their plasma rifles, the humans opened fire with their ballistic weapons, sending loud cracks through the air as their bullets tore through the Ortal ranks. The accuracy and power of the human weapons caught Kartak off guard. The bullets shattered the Ortal carapaces as if they were made of glass, cutting through multiple enemies with ease. As the Ortal neared, Kartak finally fired his plasma rifle. Meanwhile, the humans paused to reload their weapons with a speed that surprised Kartak. While his rifle overheated, he watched as the humans resumed firing, their constant barrage of bullets pushing the Ortal back. It became a rhythm. While the Barentu rifles cooled, the humans fired. When the humans reloaded, the Barentu unleashed their plasma rounds. Together, they held the line. At some point, Kartak's sergeant returned with the human officer, both of them joining the fray. As Ortal corpses piled up, the enemy finally began to retreat. Then, to Kartak's shock, the human officer gave an absurd order. "All right, boys, fix bayonets and advance. We've got them on the run. Time to squash these bugs." Kartak and his fellow Barentu exchanged confused glances as the humans affixed long, thin blades to their rifles and charged out of the trench. Kartak hesitated, then followed suit, climbing out of the trench alongside the humans. Plasma and bullets flew as the Ortal were cut down in droves. The combined assault of the humans and Barentu forced the Ortal to retreat en masse, allowing the Barentu to capture the enemy trench network. With the Ortal on the run, human and Barentu squads launched attacks on neighboring trenches, forcing the enemy to collapse on multiple fronts. After the successful offensive, Kartak's battalion, along with their new human attachment, was pulled back for rest and recuperation. During the downtime, Kartak approached the same human who had dropped into his trench just weeks earlier. "Why would you, or anyone, ever sign up to be a shock trooper? Wouldn't it be better to land in a safer spot, rather than risk going up in flames during descent?" The human, whose name Kartak had learned was Leroy, thought for a moment before answering with a grin. "Why, it's faster, of course. What kind of devil dog would I be if I didn't want to get stuck in and fight the good fight?" The end. Like and subscribe for more content.